mean, how much of a swerve would it be if everybody is going into WrestleMania 40 thinking Cody's going to leave with the belt and he doesn't? I mean, what a swerve.
For a second time.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.
Our guest today is known both in the wrestling and Hollywood spheres, and he's made his name known in both respective industries by interviewing the biggest names they have to offer, and it's coming off of his biggest month, too, with his show, Insight. Please welcome Chris Van Vliet.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for having me. I feel so underdressed. What am I doing?
Oh, it's okay. And actually, I appreciate you mentioning the tux. You'd be surprised how much people just overlook it, or maybe they just see so many people nicely dressed these days.
I don't know. I mean, this is, especially on a Zoom call, like this is not common. I'm imagining you're not wearing any pants, though.
You're not the first one to ask that either. And yeah, no, we're going with shorts today. But
see, that's what I'm talking about.
No, you got to do it comfortable. I want to get into what I said in the intro. You're coming off of your biggest month yet. I believe that was November then with Insight. And we've all seen your journey. What does an accomplishment like that really mean to you?
I think it just means we're heading in the right direction. And
yeah,
that's something I'm really happy about. Look, I've had a YouTube channel now since 2011. I started in broadcasting in 2005. My podcast started in 2019. So the fact that we're still continuing to grow, and I guess more importantly, reaching new listeners and new viewers all the time, like that's the coolest thing about this. So in April, WrestleMania was here in LA. And for anybody who listens to my podcast, you know that, yeah, I interview lots of wrestlers, like, you know, some of our favorite wrestlers that we watched growing up. I also talk to a lot of actors and comedians and entrepreneurs. And on the podcast, I was kind of dabbling in both worlds. I would have, for every wrestler I would have somebody else. And when WrestleMania came here in April, I had the opportunity to do, I think I banked 14 interviews that week. Wow. And I was like, okay, if I've got 14 now, that's almost 2 months of wrestling content. What would happen if we just put out wrestling interviews from this point on? And what happened was April became our best month ever on the podcast. Then May became the best month ever. Then June became the best month ever, and so on. And I just started to realize, okay, it's very obvious here that wrestling fans listen to the show. So let's give them as much wrestling content as we can.
Yeah, I mean, you're so synonymous with the wrestling world at this point, too. I mean, I think that was a great decision. And I had this question lined up for later, but I'll ask it now. You mentioned actors and wrestlers. Is the preparation different going into those different worlds for you?
I don't think the prep's that different, but I think what really matters here is how long is the interview. So if you're talking to someone on a red carpet, you've got, 90 seconds, maybe 2 questions. And that's something where you've got to really prepare for, like, all right, I got to be more succinct. I got to get to the point. I got to ask an actual question here. If it's a junket interview, and those are the ones you see where there's the actor on one side and the host or the interviewer on the other side,
right?
They're often doing like 30, 40 interviews in a day. Those are 4 or 5 minutes. Again, you've got to like get to the point, like ask an actual question and try to start a discussion from there. When we get to do something like this and have a longer actual conversation in a podcast, I feel like those are my favorite because you can actually just cover topics and you don't have to like immediately jump from one thing to the next thing. It's actually crazy to think about it, but I think the longer the interview, the less prepared you need to be. Like, I feel like if it's a short interview, you've got to like dial it right into like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and this. And you've got to like, oh, I'm going to do all of this research and then just pare it down to 3 or 4 questions. Whereas when you're doing a podcast and you've got 45 minutes, an hour or more to chat with somebody, it's like, all right, well, I can know a lot about this topic, but I could also just as easily go into this other topic over here. But I will say at the end of the day, the prep is the same in that you can't ever know too much. And if you're thinking the conversation is going to go this way and it veers off to the left, you should be able to follow that conversation and know what that person's talking about.
That's so interesting already. I mean, invaluable advice right there. No, it's true. I think that organicness really speaks through to like to the final product. Like you can see one of your most recent interviews. I was just watching your Chris Jericho interview today, and I mean, it goes from wrestling to music to his WWE career, and the flow is just like, I mean, it's organic. It really is, and you could tell, I think, as a viewer.
Oh, wow, man. Thank you. And I have the benefit there. Like my first interview with Chris Jericho was 10 years ago. And even though he said during our interview that he didn't remember it, I remember it. And I remember what that, what that one was like.
You knew it was his car. You knew it was his car, not yours. Yeah. I thought that was great.
Right.
Yeah.
So like 2013, 2018, did one in 2019 and then 2021. So it's like, I think it's, you build up a bit of a rapport with somebody where you don't have to like, I think in your first interview with anybody, whatever they do for a living, the first interview, you kind of have to prove yourself a little bit. You've got to build that rapport. You've got to let them know what you're all about. And then when you get to episode or interview 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever it happens to be, at least you've broken the ice. It's almost like going on a second date with someone or a third date with someone. Like,
yeah,
you get all the awkward small talk out of the way, and now it's a bit more of a flow.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think that's awesome. And to mention, so Chris Jericho, and a few weeks before that, you had Baron Corbin. Those are some just specifics, but you're really bringing together the WWE world and the AEW world, just to name a few, and the two biggest wrestling companies out there. What does it feel like to be one of the few platforms kind of almost bridging the gap between those two companies?
I don't ever look at it of like, where does this person work or what contract are they currently signed under? Like, the whole thing that I love to do with my interviews is just figure out like what makes that person tick. I feel like I'm in such an amazing position, and I'm so grateful for it to be able to have conversations with people who are living their dream. And I think that through that, we're able to, as listeners or viewers, go, oh, that's a really good piece of information. I'm going to borrow that. Oh, wow, I love that quote. I'm going to borrow that. Oh, that's a great story. I'm going to apply that to my life. So I think that that's more of what it is. And I feel fortunate whether they work for AEW, WWE, New Japan, Impact, wherever. I love that I can just have conversations with people who had a dream at one point in their life and then didn't stop until that dream got accomplished.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see those journeys. No, absolutely. And I've seen you say, like, you try to almost, what is it, like, dissect it, but backwards, right? Their journey to success. You kind of like try to dig in there and see how they made it to where they are. I think that's awesome.
Well, I think what's so interesting in that is whether someone is, I'm going to borrow a line here from Chris Jericho, whether someone's a baker, a candlestick maker, whatever, there's something in there with their journey that you can relate to. So yeah, I love the idea of reverse engineering someone's path,
that's
because
the word, yes.
Yeah. Well, whether they're at step, 73 and you're at step 2, there's a lot that could be learned. Like what step 72, 71, 70, all the way back. And I think that far too often, and a lot of this is because of social media, people just see the finished product. They just see Tom Brady with the Super Bowl rings, or they just see The Rock with, the movies that are making billions of dollars. They don't see the struggles along the way. So I'm trying to shine a light on like, all right, well, what were you doing when you were at the stage of just starting out, or when you were in high school, or whatever it happens to be, to try to humanize it in a little bit of a way.
Yeah. To somebody who's just beginning their journey too. I mean, that's huge, to see that like step by step. To ask you a question about fan bases now, because you don't look at the companies, which I think is great, that they work for. A lot of the fans right now, you could see there's a bit of a division wherever you look on social media for some reason between the WWE and the AEW fan base. And they're definitely both watching your product, like you could see through comments. So I'm curious just what you think about that overall, like our fan base kind of being a little bit divided sometimes.
Yeah, I don't understand the tribalism. Like I
No,
really
right?
don't, because at the end of the day, we're all pro wrestling fans. And I like to live in the world of like what you like. Like what you like, but just because I like what I like, or you like what you like, Jonah, doesn't mean that there's a problem with either of our interests or either of our opinions. And what I think is so weird is like that people online don't seem to realize that if you like one thing, that doesn't mean you need to hate all of the other things. It's okay to like one thing and just accept that other people have other opinions about other things. Like that is just wild to me. And we're living in such a special time right now with pro wrestling and being pro wrestling fans. Like, it's hot right now. Whatever fan, whatever company you're a fan of right now, wrestling is on the up right now, and wrestling is hotter than it's been in a very long time. And I think instead of sitting there and dissecting the things that you don't like about the show that you don't even watch that often, why not just enjoy the things that you do like? And I just don't understand why more people can't do that.
I know. And you bring up like a great point too. I'm 25, so 10 years ago when I was in high school, I mean, wearing my wrestling shirt was not the coolest thing, to do. And I know that Attitude Era, right? Like that was probably the last time wrestling was that hot. So I never thought I'd be living kind of like watching the journey. Like I've never really dipped away from being a wrestling fan. I've still watched through, the rough years and to now when it's cooler. And it's kind of cool to see it on that rise. And there's just so much of it. I don't know why anyone would like pick or choose or like you said, put it down. I mean, it's still an
And
interest,
look,
right?
like I went to high school during the Attitude Era. It's not like you were the coolest person for wearing a DX shirt or an Austin 316 shirt or a Just Bring It shirt. Like, it's not like you were the coolest, but what was great about that is if your high school had 2,000 people in it, people would find you and they'd be like, oh my gosh, you're a wrestling fan too? And like, it would instantly connect people. In the same way that if you liked a certain sports team, if you lived in Philadelphia, but you were wearing an Arizona Cardinals shirt, and there were other Arizona Cardinals fans, oh my gosh, automatically, it's like that scene from Step Brothers. Did we just become best friends? Yep. And that's what that is. So I still think that there's going to be people that are going to not like wrestling for whatever reason. Even if they've watched it before, it's just not for them. And that's okay. But what I love is that if it is for you, or if it was for you and now you're back as a pro wrestling fan, welcome back. And the great thing about wrestling is it's a buffet. Whatever style of wrestling that you're into, there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. It's an ice cream shop or whatever you want to call it, but there's a flavor for everyone. Yeah. I've been a wrestling fan, never really dipped into other sports. So it's always been kind of like my fallback, like, when anyone's having a conversation, I try to inject wrestling. I'm the wrestling guy of like any friend group. So I've always thought wrestling fans are the greatest. I met some of my best friends through that. So it's a shame to see. It's funny though, because it's wrestling fans calling wrestling fans bad. It's like, oh, wrestling fans are the worst or this or that. But I think we're pretty good people, especially if you meet each other on the line for a signing or an event. Like some of the most welcoming people I've ever met.
Absolutely.
Fans.
Although I will say that it's funny to me sometimes how wrestling fans feel like they know more than they actually know. Like, look, I was at Survivor Series. There was the buzz around around Chicago the entire week was, is CM Punk going to return? And it was either met with like this hopeful optimism of like, yeah, man, I think he might. Or on the other side, it was like, no way, man, I don't think so. And what was really funny, and I don't know if it picked up on this on TV, but that arena was so loud. What was funny is when the CM Punk chants did start, they were immediately met with boos. So it'd be like, CM Punk, CM boo. And they were almost like equally loud. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. And then when he did come back, it was just cheers from everybody.
Right. Oh, no, and you're a mind reader, Chris. That was my next question. I know you were lucky enough to be there. The biggest return that I've probably ever seen watching wrestling, CM Punk back. And I did see on TV, I was indoctrinating my little brothers who have really never watched wrestling. And that to them was like mind blowing, that loud and that much of reception. They were like, why are you so excited? Like I moved chairs to get closer to TV and everything. But I'm curious. What was it like being in the arena? You mentioned the boos, but when he did come out, I mean, was that just the most deafening pop you've ever heard live?
Look, the thing about that is wrestling gives us these moments that are like the, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening moments. And that's one of them. And if we just think about this, doesn't matter what company you are particularly a fan of, think about this, whether you love CM Punk or you hate CM Punk. Two of the biggest returns in the history of wrestling have happened in the last 2.5 years. And they've both happened with one person, CM Punk, in two different companies. That will never happen any other time I don't think, probably not in our lifetimes. Like that is absolutely wild. And I love the way the WWE handled it. Like they totally faked us out, putting the copyright up on the screen. Then his music hits. And I love how there was no commentary. There were no shots to anybody in the ring, like no reaction shots of like, what does this person think? What does this person think? It was just CM Punk and the audience and just natural sound of the crowd. And the moment just like lived on. That was so cool. I hate to admit this. I was at Survivor Series. I was in Chicago. I was inside the Allstate Arena. But you might have noticed I was covering the press conference. And the way that the WWE press conferences work is as soon as the final match ends, they take everybody up, they wrangle them up, and they put them in the press room. So it was like 1, 2, 3 on the War Games match. And then we all got corralled into the press room. So 1, 2, 3, we're all going as quickly as we can into the press room. We're all sitting there grabbing our seats. Oh, that's a pretty good show tonight. Randy Orton's back. Can you believe it? And somebody in the back of the room goes, I can't believe he's here. I can't believe he's here. And I thought maybe they were talking about like a friend of theirs that they hadn't seen all night. And they're like, dude, CM Punk's here. And I'm like, what? So we all crowd around this tiny little monitor that's on the floor of the press room. And we're like, he's there. He's right there. And he's 200 feet that way in the arena, but we're in here. He's over there. So I was there. I was in the building. I didn't experience the pop. How crazy is that, right?
That is a wild story.
And this is no fault of WWE.
No,
like
of course. Yeah.
The WWE PR people had no idea this was going to happen. This is the protocol. You know, they want to get the press conference started as quickly as they can. But yeah, I was there for it, but I wasn't really there for it.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because that was a big, like, as I'm watching, and of course I heard the rumors leading up, you know, is CM Punk going to come back? I was thinking about that press conference when that logo came up and said it, press conference immediately following. I'm like, oh, they're probably all already there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where it happens or whatever, but that did cross my mind. Oh, he's not coming back. And then I'm so sorry, Chris.
Look, I was still there and I was part of the press conference, which was so cool. About 2-3 minutes later, as the fans started filing out of the arena, we heard the CM Punk, very loud chants that were not met with boos at that point in time.
Good.
That was so cool. And then a few minutes later, Triple H came out and he was like, I don't know if you watched the press conference, but it was funny. He's like, well, we got to talk about the big return. R-Truth is back.
Yes. Which was also a fantastic return. I mean, I never think I've seen a return done quite like that, coming up from the floor, but it was cool to see him back. It was.
Coming up from a floor in a sponsored Ruffles segment. I've never seen that either.
Probably biggest return that I was ever in person for before that were the Hardy Boys at WrestleMania 33.
I was there too.
Oh, wow. Chris, you're everywhere. I mean, no, that's really cool. I remember I had a box of Bootios in my hand that I had bought at the concession thing, and like amazing. I literally, no joke, because Jeff Hardy is my favorite wrestler of all time. I put my fingers like through the box. I'm like, oh my god! Like, I was so excited, and I was with one of my best friends. It was really cool moment. And that was deafening, though. That was definitely do you remember that pop?
Of course. So I interviewed the Hardy Boys the day before at a Ring of Honor event. Oh, wow. And
I was there. Was it Lucha Bros?
Look at us. Wow.
Passing ships. That's
You can check out it was in Lakeland, Florida. You can check out the interview on my YouTube channel. But I asked them some sort of question about like, oh, you know, about the WWE Hall of Fame. And they were like, maybe one day, but like, we're not done yet. And whatever it was, 24 hours later, they came out and I was just like, wow. Yeah, that pop was deafening because of the fact, I mean, there's not many returns that happen at WrestleMania. And I think that was a big surprise, obviously, but the fact that it happened at WrestleMania, the fact that they were referring to him as Broken Matt Hardy too, that was pretty cool.
That was awesome. And that's another thing too, like he did that, as far as I know, all by himself, right? Like a reinvention of himself. And to have that, I love when the personas, gimmicks, whatever you want to call it, that these wrestlers create themselves get shown on the big screen. Like that's a really cool trajectory.
Yeah, I agree. Like rather than just coming back and like pretending that didn't happen, that was cool for WWE to go, you went and did this thing on your own and it became incredibly popular. Yeah, we'll tap into that.
Wow, that's so exciting. You got to see them beforehand too. Have you ever interviewed CM Punk?
I have once. It's the infamous never ever interview.
Oh, yes, of course, on the carpet, right?
Yes, it was such a surprise too. Like I did not expect him to be there. It was in Cleveland. It was the Alternative Press Music Awards, I believe. And I saw him on the guest list and I'm like, CM Punk's going to be here. It was like basically the first interview he did after walking out of WWE, ironically in Cleveland. Like that was where he walked out on WWE. So yeah, I interviewed him very briefly, a few minutes. I would love the opportunity to have a much longer in-depth conversation with him. But for now, we have the never ever interview. The question I asked him was, will we ever see you back in a squared circle? And he's like, no, never, never, ever, never, ever, ever.
And look at us now. That's
look
wow.
at us now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how would you go about an interview with CM Punk? I mean, I'm sure that's you'd have to really think about that and be in the moment, but someone who you mentioned, cheers are met with boos, someone a little bit decisive. Like, how do you go about an interview with someone who's a bit polarizing?
Like he's self-aware enough to know who he is and to know how the fans react to him. Like he knows that. So I don't even think that really needs to get brought up. Like he knows who he is and he knows how the fans perceive him. I would love to just dive into his career because look at what he's done everywhere he's been, whether that's Ring of Honor, WWE the first time around, and a lot of people point to the pipe bomb as the thing that brought them back into pro wrestling if they were lapsed fans. Yeah. What he did in AEW, whether you enjoyed his work there or not, or whether you watch AEW or not, you have to admit that his return to wrestling after 7 years and us thinking that he would never go back to wrestling, and he seemed pretty happy doing what he was doing, was huge. And yeah, sure, Tony Khan kind of tipped his hand and kind of said without saying, like, you should probably watch Collision or Rampage is going to be on there. Like, I still think that return was great. And now him being back in WWE, and look, it's just December. He's only been back in WWE for like 2 weeks, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens as we head into the Royal Rumble, as we head into WrestleMania, and whatever comes beyond that. I think that WWE is doing a lot of things right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that they realized what happened before with CM Punk and what maybe went wrong with that. So I feel like we're going to get some very great booking leading into WrestleMania for him.
That's exciting. And a teaser. I have some WrestleMania questions coming up, but usually the concept of the show is one rising star, one veteran, and this sort of mimics it here, but usually people more in the business, obviously, than myself. But this is exciting. I have some technique questions for you as okay. One interview to
let's
another.
Do it.
All right. So how is it different interviewing people that you grew up watching? Let's say like you have specific memories from your childhood or young adulthood, whatever, of watching them versus someone from a bit more before your time that you have to do more in-depth research on. Maybe you didn't live through what they did.
I think it's always easier when you're talking from your own core memories, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's basically Attitude Era and beyond. When I'm talking to someone that's maybe a little bit before that, I find it a little bit harder because you've got to go in and like what the internet says are their biggest moments may not be the ones that like really tug at people's heartstrings or are really the most memorable moments. And I've found a lot of times when I'm talking to a legend like Hulk Hogan, or I'm going to talk about people from like, the era that I grew up in, or like Stone Cold, or like Chris Jericho. There's moments in there that you're pulling and you're like, I've just always wondered, like, I talked to Chris Jericho recently and I was like, what was it like when Triple H tore his quad during that match and you guys still went on with the spot? You're still doing the Walls of Jericho on the announce table. And I don't know if that would be like one of Chris Jericho's major highlights, but that story was fantastic. So I find that it's always harder when you don't know, let's call it the source material as well. So I feel like that makes the work and the research that much more important.
Yeah, that's such an interesting take. And as a wrestling fan too, like I totally get that those moments that just stick with you that other fans, it might not stick with them, or even sometimes the wrestlers may not remember.
It's easy to go to someone's greatest hits. And
right.
And I think it's always great to hear some of those stories, but like, I'm sure that Mick Foley has told his story about getting thrown off Hell in a Cell
a million
however
times,
many
right?
thousands
Yeah.
of times, right? And it's still a great story, and I'm sure he's happy to tell it. But what if you could go just one layer deeper there? And if you have your own personal experiences, maybe it's like the hardcore match he had with Randy Orton, or I'm just pulling ideas here, but like I think that it's that idea of going just like one layer deeper. And sometimes you can even see them light up with like, oh man, I can't wait to tell you this story.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's to bring up a recent thing that I was able to do. I was lucky enough to sit down with Heath Slater,
I
or
love
Heath Miller. He's awesome. This was actually our second interview. So way back in the pandemic, I heard the I Got Kids story, which is an awesome story. But I'm a big Brock Lesnar guy, and something that stuck with me that I didn't see anywhere written about is when he was attacked by Lesnar with 3MB a lot earlier in his career. And it was, I think, just a short, do you remember that segment? Like, it
Yeah.
was more of a
Wow,
short
that's
segment.
a deep cut. I like it.
It was just something that stuck with me. And I was like, you know what? We got the I Got Kids. Let's go with that one. And he told a great story about, well, it wasn't a great story. I think his calf got injured or something on the F5 on the barricade because Brock did 2 F5s instead of 1, because that's just what Brock wanted to do, I guess. But still, yeah, it did get a better story out of him for sure. The deeper
And
cut.
I think that at the heart of all of this, Jonah, is it's about storytelling. I think that that's what connects us all as humans, is the ability to tell stories and the ability to relate to other people's stories. So we're really in the business not of making YouTube videos, not of creating content, not of podcasting. We're really in the business of storytelling.
So we've seen the evolution of CVV. I noticed you started putting a really cool intro, like very sleek, on all your videos, along with you're killing it with YouTube Shorts and Reels, and of course, not to mention the studio. And you've really, like you said, going in the right direction. But I'm curious, and in interviewing recently someone like Jericho, who is great at reinvention, how you always manage to reinvent and stay fresh, and when you realize it's that time to kind of evolve.
I don't know if it's reinvention so much as it's just like seeing what the next opportunity is and seeing what that white space is and just trying to take advantage of it. I feel like I was just early to the Reels / Shorts / TikTok game, the vertical video game. I feel like I was just early to it. And then I just kind of saw that there was some real opportunity there. And I went in. I don't know if I've talked about this publicly, but I make about 100 vertical videos a month. I've an amazing team, great editors. And I remember like when Reels first started becoming a thing in like 2021, I remember someone doing like a 30-day challenge, like a reel a day for 30 days. I'm like, 30 reels? What the heck am I going to post about? And I did it, and I felt like I was scraping the bottom of the barrel just to like get any sort of piece of vertical video. And now we're at a point where my editor, Troy, he's so insanely talented. He's the best, not just in wrestling. He's the best at making vertical videos. And I will give him a video or an interview like the Chris Jericho one, and he's going to pull like 12 or 15 clips from that.
That's
it's
amazing.
Like, hell yeah. Like, let's keep going with this. And in terms of like the intro at the start of it, I'm really inspired by podcasts that aren't wrestling podcasts. Like I'm really inspired by Stephen Bartlett has a podcast called Diary of a CEO. And he has these really great intros at the start of them. And I'm like, what if we could borrow from that? And Logan Paul has really great intros at the start of Impulse.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, nobody else is really doing this in the wrestling space. I don't know why. So let's borrow from that. And I hired another editor, an insanely talented editor named RJ, who works specifically on just editing those 30 seconds of video for every episode. So all of this is to say that none of this is my idea or my brainchild. I've just been smart enough to hire people that are smarter than me and more talented than me. Like, sure, I know how to edit, and I actually edited all my own videos from the start of my career. I still do edit some videos now, but I edited everything up until about 2 years ago. But then I realized, like, what's my real strength here? My real strength is connecting with people and making these interviews happen. So what if I could spend all of my time on what my strength is, and instead of being a 4 out of 10 editor, which I am, why not hire someone who's a 10 out of 10 editor so I can focus more on the things that I'm better at and I want to improve on?
I think that's such a great strategy too. I mean, I forget where I've heard this. I think I heard it on like Shark Tank, but it's not about one person doing it. It's about one person finding a good team. Nobody does it alone, right? And that's super impressive to be able to find those people.
And look, I totally get that. Like, I'm at the point now where I am grateful that I have the ability to hire out other people. That's actually been the coolest part about this whole journey is
I believe,
in me getting to live my dream as a content creator. I now get to hire out other content creators who get to live their dream of doing what they do. And like, that's been the most fulfilling part of this whole thing.
No, totally. I remember, I think I saw on Twitter or X, you put out like a job listing a while ago. I don't know if it was your first one or not, but it was like looking for work, editing. And I was like, that must feel so good for you. I mean, to be able to hire someone to give someone a living, whatever it is, based off wrestling, that's huge.
It's so cool. And I'm like so incredibly grateful just for the opportunities. Like the fact that we live in a time right now where you and I are having a conversation, like we're sitting next to each other and we're on other sides of the country. Like it's wild. It's mind blowing, right? And the fact that there's still some people that aren't taking advantage of this blows my mind equally as much. Like we're living in a time right now that if you are passionate about something, there are millions of other people that are also passionate about that same thing that exists on this crazy place called planet Earth. Just start putting your stuff out there. And it's amazing to me that people will kind of like have this analysis by paralysis. They'll just like overthink everything and they'll never actually end up starting. Just start and see where it goes and see where it takes you.
That's a great saying, analysis by paralysis. I think I've never heard that before, or paralysis by analysis.
Paralysis by analysis. Yeah, that's a real thing.
I like that.
Said it backwards there.
So yeah, you mentioned YouTube, and you've grown now. You're able to hire people, but I've watched some timelines of big YouTubers out there, like Mr. Beast, for example. I was just watching his timeline of success. And I think it could be really encouraging for some wrestling podcasters out there to hear if you remember a rough timeline of what your success was like. You mentioned starting in 2005.
Sure. Yeah. So 2005, YouTube didn't even really exist. I got my very first job as a TV reporter. Actually, I got my first job as an intern at a TV station. And then when they ended up hiring me, I was writing, editing, producing, shooting, and reporting all of my own stories. So I would go with the camera, shoot the video, take the actual tape, ingest it into a system and edit like tape to tape. That's where it began for me. 2007, I got a job for MTV2 Canada, and I was interviewing a lot of celebrities. That's where I like first started working in entertainment. And that's where I got my first ever wrestling interview. Bobby Lashley was in town with WWE. He was the ECW champion at the time. So that was the first wrestling interview, 2007. And I started uploading videos at that time on YouTube, just kind of because the old school model of broadcasting just kind of sucks in that, like, unless you're watching that exact channel at that exact time on that exact day, you'll never see that piece of content. And I was just like, that sucks. If I'm interviewing a big band or a big celebrity, I want other fans of their work to be able to see it. So I just started taking those interviews, putting them on this YouTube channel with like a dumb name that wasn't even related to me because I didn't want my boss to find out I was doing this. I was ripping them from our website, putting them up on YouTube. But 2011, I started the YouTube channel that I have now. And I think a big thing to point out for everybody is we all start at zero. Everybody starts at zero. Mr. Beast started at zero. Logan Paul started at zero. Everybody starts at zero. And I think it's too easy in the world that we live in to just look at someone with 1 million subscribers, 20 million subscribers, 100 million subscribers, whatever it happens to be, and go, I can't do that. That's too far off. That mountain peak is too high. But for me, it was 2011. I started. I didn't get that silver play button right there until I was 6.5 years into doing it. No, 7.5 years. I didn't get it till 2018.
See, that's so crazy. Yeah.
It was a heck of a journey. It was like, grinding it out. And I think that the big thing there is just start and just be consistent. I think, so my timeline there is starting that channel 2011, and here we are now, 2023. The main channel has 385,000 subscribers. The Clips channel, which is called CVV Clips, where I put just the short moments and great memories from these interviews up on the one channel, that has exploded. So that started like 2 years ago. I hit 400,000 subscribers on Sunday. It's now at like 425,000 subscribers 5 days later now. Like the growth on that channel's been crazy. And I believe the big takeaway there is, I think a lot of people will say, oh, attention spans, they're way down. Yeah, sure. Maybe that factors into it a little bit. But I think the bigger thing is, if someone texts you a link to an hour-long YouTube video or an hour-long podcast and says, oh, Jonah, you've got to see this podcast, you're going to click on that link. You're going to see the runtime and you are immediately going to click off of that video.
Right.
But if someone sends you a 27-second clip from that exact same episode and says, oh, man, you got to check this out, pretty good chance you're going to watch that 27-second clip. I like to think of those as breadcrumbs. And hopefully you like those breadcrumbs enough that it leads you to the slice of bread, which for me is like a 3 to 5 to 8 minute full clip. And if you like that slice of bread enough, maybe you'll be interested to go check out the loaf of bread, which is the full episode.
I love that analogy so much, as someone who recently like started doing reels as well and shorts, and I also do clips. I think dividing it onto a channel though was so smart of you, like to do that. But yeah, I think I love that analogy. I have not heard the bread analogy before.
That wasn't my brilliance or my idea there. It's I just saw what other channels were doing, like other big podcast channels. Joe Rogan, perfect example. Before he went to Spotify, he had a main channel and he had a clips channel. Logan Paul had a main channel and an impulsive clips channel. And I was just like, full send, main channel and then a clips channel. I went, there's something here. Tony Robbins always says success leaves clues. So I'm like, if they're all doing this, I should probably follow suit. I don't know why, but I should probably do what they're doing.
No, absolutely. And you've inspired, and I'm sure you've run into a lot of them, but there's so many wrestling interview YouTubers like myself at a small level who will get like discouraged if they put so much work into a video and it doesn't get the views that they desire. And so it's interesting to hear that your journey was a slow burn. And I think, like you said, kind of re-engineering all of those journeys for like the million subscribers, 200 subscribers. It's encouraging to see that. It keeps you going, I think.
Yeah, you got to realize that every overnight success, took 10 years or whatever it took to get there. Yeah, and the other thing is, you got to make content because you like making content. If you are making content because you're trying to hit a certain number of views with every single video, or you're trying to get to a certain number of subscribers like right away, you should probably just stop what you're doing right now. If you don't love every part of the process of creating the content, then you're totally approaching it wrong, in my opinion.
Right. If you think if it feels like a chore or work or something like that, right?
And if it feels like a chore or work, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, because you should be putting your time and your focus and your effort into the things that juice you up, into the things that excite you.
And so to pivot, so you talked earlier a little bit about when the interview is longer, it takes even less preparation sometimes, which I think is really interesting. And on the role you're on right now, just releasing, it seems like an interview every week. I'm not sure exactly what the schedule is, but it's been very consistent with huge names. What is the prep? What does the prep look like for you, and time management really with all of that?
So it's 2 interviews every week. It's Tuesday and Thursday, no matter what's going on. That's the commitment that I've made for the channel and to the people who watch the channel and listen to the show on the podcast. So I always think that if that's the commitment that I'm going to make, hopefully over, enough time, that listeners and viewers are going to make the commitment of also showing up. So I think the biggest thing for me is finding the guests. That I think is the toughest thing. I'm trying to do as many interviews as I can in person. So if you think about it, if it's 2 a week, there's 52 weeks in a year, it's 104 guests a year. So it's a tough thing to nail down 104 great conversations, great guests. So that's where it begins. Then once we get the guests, it's diving right into research and kind of just like my own curiosity of like, what would be a good question to ask this person, or what would be a good question to ask that person. That's really where it begins. Sorry.
So Chris, I'd love to get into some things when it comes to wrestling. A big buzzword right now in wrestling, I feel, is mainstream. And everyone asks, like, is this guy mainstream or is that guy mainstream? I'm curious what your thoughts are if you think wrestling, because we mentioned how hot it is wrestling just starting to be mainstream again?
I don't know if wrestling will ever fully be mainstream. I think that there's a few things, right? Like I think that lots of people know what the DX crotch chop is, or a lot of people know like Austin 316, but just because those things have made their way into the, general zeitgeist doesn't like most people that do the crotch chop couldn't name the members of DX. Most people that know an Austin 316 shirt have no idea about the promo and Jake the Snake and everything like that. So I think the idea of wrestling might be mainstream, but I don't think wrestling itself will currently. I don't think wrestling right now is mainstream where like a random person on the street could tell you who the champion is, or if a random person on the street would even recognize, 5 people that are in the WWE. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. In the same way that like Game of Thrones was insanely popular, but there's still a whole bunch of people that have no idea the names of any of the characters or anything like that.
Right.
So I think wrestling is on the rise for sure. Wrestling is more popular now than it's been in a long, long time, and it's only continuing to get popular. And I think that even between now and WrestleMania 40, it's going to grow even more. I also think that this merger with TKO, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what's really possible here. Like UFC has become this huge, huge name in MMA and in sports in general. And I feel like if they can take just a little bit of that, sprinkle it on WWE, I think that WWE, maybe it'll start to, be talked about on Sports Center frequently. I don't know, but I just feel like they know what they're doing with this merger here. And I feel like it's only going to benefit us as fans.
Yeah, it certainly has such a fresh feel to it, WWE specifically. Like, I haven't seen it in years, and I go back and, watch shows from maybe like 2012, 11, 13, and it's just a completely different feel just from a production standpoint alone. You look at some of the stuff with like the Bloodline storyline, for example, which I mean, that was one of the best things that I've seen watching wrestling in a long time myself, stories told, but the like the ebbs and flow that it went through and everything, it was incredible.
It's almost like wrestling needed a reset after the pandemic. Like,
Yeah,
there was a lot of great stuff that happened during 2020 and 2021 that no one will ever go back and want to rewatch. Like, no one's watching highlights before the Thunderdome of like the empty arena shows. Like, it's almost sad to see that, because wrestling is all about that crowd reaction, and watching wrestling without a crowd's like watching a comedy show without a crowd there to laugh along. So I almost think it needed this reset. And then the timing after that of Vince kind of stepping aside, Triple H fully stepping in, we're starting now, I feel like, to really, in WWE at least, really see what Triple H having his fingerprints on the product looks like.
yeah, we are. That's such a cool way to look at it, a reset button. It really did feel like that, especially as everyone's starting to get in their flows now and their grooves. It's really something to see. I feel like wrestling is now something you can show. Like I mentioned earlier, I was showing my little brothers, they're 12 and 8, and they were really getting involved in the story. And if it's not the story, it's something creative, like War Games, for example, is a really cool thing to show someone who's never seen wrestling before.
Yeah, and I think there's some really big characters right now. Like, my friend who doesn't even watch wrestling loves LA Knight. And that's one of those characters that you can really sink your teeth into, right? Yeah. It's just great. And I think that harkens back to the people that we had in the Attitude Era. Like, whether you liked wrestling or not, you were aware of what, this meant, and you were aware of it doesn't matter. You were aware of, oh, hell yeah. And I think that that's kind of what we're into right now. There's people that are not even they're not at a wrestling show, but they're doing like this thing, and it's like, oh yeah, I get it. So like, I just love that it's making its way into the mainstream. To circle back to that last question.
Oh, so you put your one up there. I'm curious, when it comes specifically to the Bloodline, we'll start with someone like Sami Zayn's involvement, a fellow Canadian, of course. What did you think about the evolution we saw of Sami throughout that whole storyline?
I love that Sami just took what worked for him and just ran with it. And I applaud WWE for allowing him to take what made him so authentically him and to be able to run with it and do his own thing. It reminded me a lot of the Daniel Bryan Yeselmania run, where it was
Yes.
just like, he's not our guy, but we can't ignore the fact that the crowd is so into this. So I love that. And I love the match that he had, in his home country, in his hometown. That was so cool.
The energy there was unmatched. It reminded me of it was somewhat like that. Do you remember when Santino almost won the world title and the crowd was going crazy? And I know I
Yes.
was like watching live. It was something like that where the underdog, and of course Sammy had so much more story to it, but still it was such a moment you could really get behind. And again, even if you'd
Yes.
never watched wrestling before and just got the tidbits of what that was about, I feel like you'd be
Yeah.
invested. Yeah. Another person in that same conversation is Jey Uso, main event Jey Uso now. He's totally on a different level, I feel, than he was. He broke out of the twin shadow. What did you think about his role in the Bloodline and where we see him now?
And I always feel for twins, and my nephews are twins, Colin and Clark. And the thing
Love
that
it.
I always feel for them for is they're always referred to as the boys or the twins. And it's like,
Mhm.
it's never Colin and Clark, it's never Jay and Jimmy. It's always like this like conglomerate of like this thing. So him breaking off and doing his own thing is amazing. And I'm really curious where this storyline ends up leading to, but breaking off, doing his own thing, showing that he is a single star kind of reminds me of like when Edge and Christian broke off and did their own things, when the Hardy Boys broke off and did their own things. This is like, they're look, the Usos are one of the greatest tag teams of all times,
Yeah.
all time. Look at the numbers. I mean, it's just obvious, but them also being able to be successful on their own is a true testament to how talented that both are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I saw your interview with both of them. I think it was at a Cricket Wireless store. It seemed like it was. I believe in there they said a dream of theirs was to headline, or whether it be at a WrestleMania against each other, but to have a program with one another. And they weren't sure if that was going to ever happen. And now we have the opportunity to really see that.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting what happens here. I feel like when Roman ends up losing the title, whenever that happens to be, I don't feel like we see Roman for a while. Like Roman right now
Yeah.
is kind of in that, it's in that like Brock Lesnar booking, it feels like, where when he shows up, it means something and it's a big match, but like he doesn't need to always be there for the titles to mean something. So I feel like when he does drop off, I feel like, or when he does drop the title, he's going to drop off and we're not going to see him for a little while. I could be wrong, but I feel like that's when it starts to set up something for Jimmy and Jay or whatever is beyond the bloodline, because man, the bloodline, we're going on almost 4 years now. It's incredible.
It really is. And yeah, you brought up something. I was actually just talking about that with my friend the other day. Like, how do you bring Roman back after he does lose those belts? Like, he's had such a stranglehold on them and been such a dominant champion. Like, I don't know what his first promo even looks like after
Yeah,
that.
I don't know. It's not like he's in a John Cena position where John Cena was really good. And I don't think people give him enough credit for this. John Cena was so good at floating between the main event and the mid card. Like
Mhm.
he, of course, has held the championship 16 times, but he also made the US title feel so significant, whether he had it or whether he was chasing it. And I don't think you could put Roman in even the World Heavyweight Championship picture, let alone the IC title or the US title, and make it feel significant. I would love to be wrong here, but it just doesn't feel like it would fit.
No, I don't think so either. I think he's surpassed it. And if there is a, I don't know what you'd call this era. A lot of people have a different name for it, but like the modern era, post COVID era, if there is a star that has moved into the mainstream, I feel like it would be Roman. So many people have at least heard of Roman Reigns that I've spoken to.
Yeah, I
And
really
yeah,
wonder if he's going to make a move into movies. Like we've seen him in a few things. It was a
right.
nice surprise to see him in The Wrong Missy, that David Spade movie.
I didn't see that he was in it.
He's in it for like a scene, like he's a tough guy at the bar, but and he was in Fast and Furious with The Rock, which was
Right, that I
cool.
saw. Yep.
But it would be very interesting to see if he's going to sink his teeth into like, some leading man roles. I'm curious. It's not like, look, he's so talented. He's made plenty of money in WWE. The guy never needs to work again in his life. And that is not the point here. I'm just very curious what he ends up doing with the talents that he has.
Yeah. And the burning question, what do we think about who is going to actually take the belts off of him? Do you have any idea who might take the Undisputed World Championship from Roman Reigns?
It still feels like Cody's going to finish the story. Like as we sit here right now, it's December of 2023. We're likely talking about something that's going to happen 5 months from now at WrestleMania 40 in April. I just feel like that's what we're headed towards. I feel like there's a possibility Cody could win the Rumble again. That could end up being the story leading into WrestleMania. I'm not sure, but I just don't see Roman Reigns holding the championship after WrestleMania 40. And this is a kind of an aside here, but it's interesting to me. I loved WrestleMania 39. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I was there. It's interesting to me how many people don't like WrestleMania 39 because the last 5 minutes of the show, they wanted Cody to win so badly that it ruined the entire rest of the show for them. And I just feel like it was such a huge surprise for Cody to not win that I feel like leading into WrestleMania 40, as of right now, as we sit here right now, that feels like the story that makes the most sense.
I'm with you in that. And to go back to what you said, I was able to be there too. And in my section, somebody was beating his chair. Like he was trying to like rip the chair out of anger that Cody didn't win. Yeah, he was so angry. And that was the way it was. You're right. Like so many people, they're sour on that WrestleMania just for that one reason too, that last 5 minutes. And I've heard the saying from different people in the business. I think Vince McMahon, they'll only remember the finish. The finish is what matters. But still, that was such a fantastic WrestleMania. Both nights, I enjoyed every match on them. I mean, it had, and again, biased because we were there maybe a little bit. We had that feeling, but still, I mean, I think it was just on paper and in the matches, a great WrestleMania.
Although, I mean, how much of a swerve would it be if everybody is going into WrestleMania 40 thinking Cody's going to leave with the belt and he doesn't? I mean, what a swerve.
For a second time. I feel like that would start some type of... Do you remember the Sasha Banks reputation where she won a title but could never defend it? I feel that would be Cody. He works and beats everyone all year, but then when it comes down to it, he can't get it done.
Look, I think at the end of the day, Cody's going to be a multiple-time WWE champion. It's just a matter of when is he going to get it the first time? Because, there's no question that they're building Cody to be the face, or at least one of the faces of WWE. And that man works so hard. I have nothing but a tremendous amount of respect for Cody Rhodes. Watch any of the videos of the interactions he has with fans after a house show. Watch any of the videos of Cody signing 3,000 autographs, sitting there just signing all these autographs backstage. That man loves the business and that man loves the fans. And I think that they're putting him in this position and they're giving him this opportunity. It's just a matter of time at this point.
It really is. And another event we're on the heels of right now, or no, coming up to, we will be on the heels, is the Royal Rumble. Any early picks for the Royal Rumble?
It's so hard. It's so hard because I don't even feel like we're even teasing Royal Rumble storylines yet right now, which is very interesting to me. Cody could be a good pick. Actually, I'm curious, since we have all the world's information sitting in front of us right now, I'm curious what the odds are right now. Like,
I've never looked at the odds. Where are you getting it?
Just the general.
General. Oh, okay,
yeah. Like the betting odds.
Yeah, right.
So Cody and CM Punk have equal favorites right now. Actually, you could go to mybookie.ag and use the
Excellent.
LA Knights up there as a favorite. The Rock, I don't know about that. So yeah, I Nia Jax, Raquel Rodriguez, these are our favorites right now. I don't know. It feels weird to say, but I think it's too early to really know. Like, because if you and I had the same discussion 3 months ago, 2 months ago, we'd be throwing The Rock's name around there. And how fascinating is it that The Rock shows up on SmackDown? We make this huge deal about it. And here we are now a few months later, no one's even talking about The Rock. Fascinating. Same thing with LA Knight. LA Knight's not on one pay-per-view, and he's still doing lots of other great things on TV, and that man is so talented, but he's not even part of the conversation right now, which I think is so interesting. So it's such an early prediction. We're still, 6-7 weeks away from the Rumble. I feel like we need to see how the next bunch of Raws and SmackDowns kind of shape up, and I think by the time mid-January rolls around, both you and I, Jonah, will be able to go, oh yeah, that person's going to win.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick the world of wrestling moves, but also amazing how perceptive some fans are. Like, I remember Brock immediately like zoomed to everyone's mind when he lost that first match. When did he win the Rumble? Was that he lost the first match, or he lost to Bobby Lashley, I should say, but then came out in the Rumble and won it all. So, and everyone was like, oh, at this point, I think Brock's going to take it all. It's wrestling fans catch on so quick, like detectives.
Yeah, wrestling fans also, I don't think, give things enough time to breathe. Like, I think that they'll see one thing on SmackDown, one thing on Raw, one thing on Dynamite, and be like, oh man, I can't believe they're doing this thing to this person. It's like, all right, give it some time here. Okay, give it some time. Give it a week or 2 or 3 and see what the whole story is.
No, I agree. Patience and just see where all these awesome characters are in a few weeks.
Patience is a virtue, yes.
Patience is a virtue. Out of all the great sayings you've said so far, I think that's the best. Patience is a virtue.
That's very applicable for wrestling fans, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, of course, Chris. I know you end all of your interviews with the gratitude question, 3 things that your guest is grateful for. I'll turn that on you. Right now, still a page out of your book. What are 3 things that you are grateful for at this very moment?
Man, Jonah, thank you for having me on, and congrats on all the success that you've had. And I know you're just getting started, so can't wait to see where you're at a month from now, a year from now, and so on. Also, thank you for correcting me on paralysis by analysis. I don't know why I said it the other way
I
around.
thought I said it wrong, which is why I did that.
Analysis by paralysis doesn't even make sense. It rhymes, but it doesn't make any sense. So paralysis by analysis. I'm grateful for my family. I'm so grateful for my wife, Rachel, and our little girl, Logan. So grateful. And I'll go right into number 2 with that one, with our health. Like, so grateful for our health. And I think that is so undervalued. You know, I'll throw another phrase at you. I love these quotes. The well man has 1,000 problems and the sick man has 1. And I feel very grateful that everybody close to me has their health. And number 3, I'm just really grateful for opportunities. Like the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, we're sitting in different cities in this country and we're talking like we're sitting next to each other. That's wild. And I love that these opportunities exist right now and that we're able to capitalize on them. There's no limit of how many videos you can make, or no limit of how many podcasts you can put out. I love that the opportunity is sitting right there in front of us for the people who are willing to go out and grab it.
Oh, it's mind-blowing. And a perfect segue into my final question. This is how I end all of my interviews.
I like it.
Yes. I usually ask the veteran if they have any advice for the rising star, but I'll say, if you have any advice for me as I continue, or really anybody in the shoes I'm in, just getting started with this wrestling interview journey.
So I will say to someone who's just getting started, number 1, you just got to start. Like, just start, like just get going and then keep going. And I think the most important thing is consistency. It's all about like you showing up, whether it's every Monday or it's every Thursday or whatever it happens to be. It's you being consistent with your audience, and then your audience will start being consistent with you. And the bigger your show gets or your following gets, the bigger the opportunities will start to become. So it's really just a matter of looking at it as a long game. And I think that way too many people, especially when it comes to YouTube or podcasts, will look at their metrics after a month and go, it's not for me. And that's it. They pack it up and never, bother doing it ever again. And it's about knowing that it's a long game. This is not something you're just doing for a month or a year. It's something that you're doing for a long time, and get comfortable in doing that week in and week out.
Excellent advice. Really, just stick with it. And I mean, Chris, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you for coming on. Really.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.